Welcome to the next video in my RPG in a Box game logic scripting series. In the previous video, we talked about binary state management. In this video, we're going to take a look at a couple of instances of slightly more involved state management for when there's sort of different types of when it's not necessarily the state of a entity or a thing that can be in two states, but it might be, for example, if you've typed something correctly, or you've got a list of choices that are more than two, those sort of things. There's a couple of other sort of outlying scenarios outside the ones we covered in the previous video that you'll obviously want to know as well. So this will make a bit more sense when we go into the couple of examples that I've got planned for this video. So I've got a quick, simple example set up here where I've got a secret door which is tied, or is going to be tied, to this computer. Okay. And the idea, this is the idea I have in my head, and I'm going to show you in this video two ways that we can implement this. My idea is the player uses the computer and they'll find some way of opening the door. Okay. The first way is with a password. Okay. So aside from the desk with the computer on it as a object, I've also gone into the UI editor and I've created this widget, and it says computer password. It's just a simple widget with a text field on the widget set to single line, and then a button. Okay. And then obviously we need to script the password. So we'll start with the text being blank by default. That's what it should look like when you start. So we need to think about how we piece this together. And as we go through, again, you'll see examples of how you can approach different logic with your game designs. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this door an ID, because again, our scripts need to know what we're referring to. So I'm going to call this a secret door. And I'm going to click on the computer and I'm going to call this computer 1. So I've given our two important parts of this each a unique ID. I'm going to select the computer and I'm going to right click on it and assign a quick script. And this quick script is going to check the state of the door. So what we should probably do first is track the state of our secret door, because currently it's closed. So just like we did with the previous video, let's expand on what we did in the previous video and reuse it. So the same thing we're going to do is we're going to set a Boolean signal on our secret door, open false. So it's not currently open. And on our computer, we're going to check that signal. So if entity, and because the secret door is not the computer, this script is going on the computer. It's going on here. It's not going on the door. I can't use self. So I'm going to have to type the ID of the secret door and then check the property open. And if it equals false, then I'm going to show widget PC, which is the one I made that's got the password and the OK button. And now I'm just going to click end, because if the door is open, then I don't need the password terminal to come up, because you've already opened the door at that point. So if you've opened the door, nothing should happen when you click on the computer. So I don't need to add an else to this condition. I don't need to check for anything else. If it's false, great. That's the only time it should show the password box. The moment the signal gets changed to true when the door's open, this will just not do anything. Okay, so that's our computer's code, very simply done. Okay, but now we need a bit of code for our password box, which is going to obviously do all the heavy lifting. So we need to go back to the UI editor, and we need this OK button to have a script assigned to it, which checks what we've typed and validates it. Okay, so we should probably think about what the password is for our secret door. So let's just make the password RPG in a box, let's say. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the script editor, and we're going to make a new script file that's going to go onto our button click event. So we'll call this password submit. So we don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to make life simpler moving forward. But I'm going to create what's called a local variable. And to create a local variable, you always type $ and then the name of your global variable. Your local variable. So I'm just going to call this password. And it's going to equal widget pc dot element 0001 dot text. Okay, so let me just explain what this is doing. This is taking the password box, the text that we type in, and it's going to store it inside this local variable. Now, what is a local variable? A local variable is temporary, and it only exists in this script while it's running. Okay, so because this text is now going to be stored in here, it just means when we want to reference this from now on, we can use $password instead of having to retype all of that. Okay, but essentially what we're doing first of all, whenever we click OK, is we're taking the text that we've typed and we're storing it into this variable here so we can use it. And now we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to check if $password is equal to, and it's just like the condition we had on the door, but we're now not checking a signal, we're checking a password. So if this text is equal to, and then what do you want to compare it against? RPG in a box. Now, in the case of this code, it would have to be typed exactly like that with the capitals and everything. But just for a simple example, it's fine. So if password is equal to that text, then we want to hide widget PC. We want to play animation entity secret door, and I have an animation called slide open, and then we want to set entity secret door dot property open to now be true. Okay, so we're changing the signal at that point. Else would now be, what if it's not that password? What if it's anything but RPG in a box? Now, if you wanted to, you could do you could have sort of Easter eggs or cheats or something like that. If you wanted, you could say else if $password is equal to password, then that could be like an Easter egg. In this case, if the text didn't equal that, but it does equal that, then something else could happen instead. Maybe the door wouldn't open, but a sound would play or something saying, who would use that password or something like that, right? The point is you can have other things happen. But in this case, I'm only interested in if the password is specifically RPG in a box. Otherwise, if the player types anything else, then let's just change the text. So we'll have widget PC dot element 0001 dot text, and we'll change it to wrong or invalid code. End. Okay, so let me just quickly point out this element stuff in case you're confused about it. So when you create a widget, which is what this is, okay, you have the widget, which is the overall, the whole panel. That's got the ID of PC over here. Okay, so that's why I'm typing widget PC. That's a reference to the whole, this panel here. Okay, the element is this, and notice it has element ID 0001. This one has an element ID 0002. So I'm checking this. Okay, so that's why I'm typing 001. So in our code, when we say widget PC, that's the whole that's the whole panel. And then specifically this element, which is then the text field, and then the text itself that's in that text field. So whatever you type, this will be the text, that gets stored in this variable. We then check if what's in that variable is this text. And if it is, we do all of this stuff. Otherwise, if it's anything other than that text, we do this, and we change the text that's been typed into this element to that. Okay, and that should be us good to go. So let's quick play and see if this works. So here we are in game. So just to recap before we do everything, this sliding door should be emitting a signal saying that it's not open. So open, false, which this is checking for. When we interact with this computer, as long as it is false, we're going to get our password box to come up. And then we can interact with the password box. Okay, so let's just check that works. And there we go. So we've got our password box, and that's appeared because the door is false. The door is open false. Okay, so now if I type jump, let's say, I don't know, I'm just thinking random words, that's not the password. So the moment I click OK, it's going to check the text, and if it doesn't equal RPG in a box, it should come back and say invalid code. Oh, it would do if I assigned the script to the button. That would help. So obviously we do need to assign our password submit to the actual submit button. Now let's run it. So if I retype jump, now we get invalid code. Okay, and it's done that because it checked what we typed, and because it didn't equal RPG in a box, it did the other thing. It did the else, which was to replace the text with invalid code. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. If it's false, you could have a beep sound, you know, like a error sound or something, or an alarm could go off, or anything you want. That would be in the else section of that condition. Okay, so let's do one more just to check, and then we'll do RPG in a box. Let's do password. Again, it's an invalid code. But now the moment I type RPG in a box, that will now match the password. So now when that is the case, a few things are going to happen. This is going to hide this panel. It's then going to open this door. It's going to play the open animation. And then it's going to change the signal from opened false to opened true. So let's see if that happens. Okay, so the door's opened, and if I click the computer now, the panel doesn't come up. Why? Because it's no longer valid. This is checking for this to be false, but now it's true. This is not presenting me the password box anymore. Now, if I was to change it manually, let's just cheat a little bit by bringing the console down and doing self.property open equals false. So I've set it back to false. Now when I click on this, the password box comes up again because it's false, and that's what it needs for the password box to come up. Okay, so again, that's a very simple implementation, and that's also how to do a password box if you wanted to know. Very simple. There's other ways you can do it, but that's one way to go about it. But the point is, with this script, what we're doing is we're checking a specific bit of text. Does this match what your game is particularly looking for? Are they typing in the correct password for your game? So let's also go over multiple conditions. So another way that we could do this is not with the user interface. So let's cancel this. Let's go back to our password computer, and let's right click on this and do edit quick script. And instead of doing this, let's check the signal again on the door and check specifically what the signal is. So in this case, is it equal to false, which it should be to begin with. And then what we'll do is we'll create another variable which we'll call result. And this is going to equal display choices. And we'll say, what is the password? And then we can have an array. And we can have password, bananas, RPG in a box, and we'll have one more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So what this is basically doing is this is creating a player choice with the title, what is the password? So they've then got a series of choices they can make. So rather than typing in a password, this is going to be a series of choices the player gets. That's obviously restrictive. They can only choose one of those 4, but, you know, this could be dialogue choices. This could be, you know, a whole manner of things you can do with display choices. But in this case, what we're doing is we're just giving the player a set of 4 things they could try, in this case, guessing the password. Okay. But now what we can do is we can check what result is equal to. In other words, which one of those 4 did they choose? So if result is equal to 0, that means they chose the first thing, because it's probably going to be a bit advanced if you're a complete beginner, but just to understand, arrays go from 0 to however many things there are. So if I can get to the line below, let me just quickly do this. So they go from 0, 1, 2, 3. And if I had another thing, it would be 4, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So that's, the arrays always start from 0. So when we say if result is equal to 0, we're checking if it's this first thing here. So let me just go back. So if result is equal to 0, then what do we want to have happen when they select the option password? Well, this is where you could then have a display message. We'll just do that for now. That just goes something like that for now. And then you would do an else if $result equals 1. And in this case, I'm just going to keep copying this. What if they pick bananas in this case. Well, we'll do the same thing. Incorrect. Else if $result is equal to 2, then now 2, I believe, is RPG in a box. Yes. So in this case, this is when we would then play animation entity secret door open. And then because this whole condition is checking for it, we will update the signal. So entity secret door dot property open is now equal to true. And then we'll go back to else if. What if it's 1, 2, 3, 4? Then we want that same message to come up. Okay. Now we could just put, we need to put an end here. Now we could just put end at the end of the loop, at the end of the if here, and have the choice just not appear when the door's open. So in other words, when you open the door, you don't get these choices anymore. But what we could also do is we could put an else to this condition as well. What if it is true? We could have something else happen. Instead of nothing happen, we could have a display message that says the door is already open. Something like that. So telling you that you don't need to interact with it anymore. Okay. We'll click validate and click OK. So what we've basically scripted there, very simply, is a display choices that has multiple conditions checking if it's this or this or this or this, basically. Now, another thing that we could do, just so it's clear, we don't need to actually specify this one because we could just say else here. The reason being, we don't need the then. The reason being is because this condition, this result here can only contain 4 things. That, and that. So by the time you've clicked one, we're checking if it's this specifically, then do that. If it's this specifically, do that. If it's this specifically, do this. If it's none of those 3, then it must be the 4th one. If it's not that, or that, then it can only be that. So in that case, we could just say, if it's not that, then else. Just do this if it's none of those. So we don't actually have to specify specifically if it's not that, or this. We can just say, if it's none of the above, then you can do that. And that would be the same as if it's not that, or that, then that would also apply for when it's else, no? So if it's not password, if it's not bananas, if it's not RPG in a box, then it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this else will cover that, okay? Without you having to specify that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll leave it at that. So we've got this if that's checking if the door is not open, then do this whole display choices thing that then opens the door and then changes the signal to true. And then when we next interact with the computer, because the signal's changed, none of this will happen. Instead, it will just say the door is already open. Okay. So again, let's check and see if this works. So here we are in game. So the door should start with the signal being false. So this should bring up the choices. What is the password? Password, bananas, RPG in a box, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's try password. Incorrect. Okay. Door doesn't open. Let's click on the computer again. Because we didn't open the door, we get the choices again. So bananas. Oh no, that's incorrect. What about 1, 2, 3, 4? Oh no, that's incorrect as well. Okay, what about RPG in a box? Okay, well, it set the property, changed the signal, and it's changed the message. But for some reason, it didn't play the animation, and I know why. I didn't give it the correct name. It's slide open, not open. So we'll just go through it one more time. But now let's choose RPG in a box. Okay, so the door's slid open. And now if we click the computer, now it's open, we just get the door is already open. Okay, because there's no point having the password options when the goal has already been achieved. Okay. So those are a couple of examples of how you can go beyond what we covered in video 1, but again, just showing more use cases of how you check something and then change it. Again, using signals, still using these properties here. Has the door been opened? You could have a signal on here. Has the computer been used? That kind of thing. Let's go back to the script for this for a second. At the moment, we have it so that every time you click a choice, you get a message, but then it closes the choice. So you could also repeat the choice again. So it interacts with the computer again. So show you how to do that. Interact with entity. And then you would use self because it's self. So if we did that on that one, but not this one, on all the ones that are incorrect passwords, basically. So now, if we run it, the moment we make a choice, we get incorrect, but then we get the choices again. So we can choose another one without having to click the computer again. We get straight back to the choices again, and we can keep choosing different ones until we get the right one, and then it closes, the door opens, and then when we re-engage with the computer, we don't get the choices anymore because the door is already open. So there's sort of examples of how you can then embellish, what you've created. But as you can hopefully appreciate, it's not that difficult. You just have to think through what are the signals that you want to check for. What I want to check if the door's been open. You could also store whether you've used the correct password. When the password's correct, you could have a player.property password solved equals true. So now you can have a separate signal that's being emitted from the player that a quest could be listening out for. Did you solve that password? Well, now it's true. So your dialogue or something can check this. So again, when we talked about earlier about you need a signal, you need to check the signal and change the signal. This would be an instance where you're setting a signal or changing it, in this case, to true. And then your dialogue would check the signal. So you'd have a dialogue. You would go to your dialogue editor. You make a new dialogue to 3 or something. And then you'd have a condition to start with. And the condition would be if player, bring this up, if player property equals Boolean. So then you'd have in here, password solved equals true. That would be your dialogue. And then you'd have, and now your dialogue would respond to the fact that you solved that password, So everything in not just RPG in a box, but, game design and in most programming, it's all done by state management, just knowing what something's been set as, saved as. So hopefully in these 2 videos, these 2 parts, you've sort of got a good grasp of where you can sort of apply this knowledge to your idea. Start with, setting a signal on something, checking that signal, setting that signal, and just seeing what can be done with that alone. Most ideas can be achieved just by that alone. And then anything beyond that, if you want to check for a specific text or check for a specific number, that's what I've kind of covered in this video, because the first one was text, which was the password. And then the last one we just did, the result, is a number, because what you get back when you use the choices is a number range in an array. So we're checking if that number is 1 or 2 or 0 or whatever. So this should give you all you really need to go with. If you want to check for a number, here's the example. If you want to check for text, that's what we did with this button here, with this code, password submit. We did that here, if it equals this text. And we covered binary states. Is it true or false? Is it open, closed, in, out, up, down, that kind of thing, alive, dead. All of those things we've covered, and you should be really good and set to go now with most state tracking in games. So we're going to go over some more scripting stuff like loops and things in the next videos, but that will wrap up this set of videos on state management, and I will see you in the next video.